guys, it's Tori, and today I'm starting my reading vlog, my spoilery reading vlog for Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, the third and final book in the Farseer trilogy. I'm so excited to get to this. It's finally time. It's been a couple of months since I read the second book, and while I really liked it, it kind of left me with maybe a little bit of disappointment in a way that made it so I just needed to take a break from the series because I was a little bit disappointed and frustrated with Fitz in a way that I just, not that I hated the book, but that I just needed a break from it. So it's finally time. I'm back, ready to get back into it. Today is May 3rd. I'm reading this also for Misery May because Fitz is a miserable boy, so it works very well for that readathon. I can't decide exactly how I want to go about this. I may just update you every like 200 pages. In total, it's 838 pages. So I'm thinking 200 to 250. We'll split it up into about 4 separate sections, and I think that will be effective, although I may just come on here whenever I feel like I have things I need to say. But I feel like 200 to 250 pages is also enough time, particularly for this book, to give me a good amount to say without making it like I have too much to say. Although this could be a faster paced one, being the third and final book in the series. I don't know. But I'm very excited to see where Fitz ends up after the events of the last one. I'm excited to see where Verity is. That's probably my biggest excitement. If you haven't seen my other vlogs, particularly my last one for Royal Assassin, I love Verity. He's my favorite character for sure. Definitely a fictional crush of the year so far. So yes, very excited about that. And like I said, I'll let you know my thoughts as I go along, and it will have all the spoilers. So this is also your spoiler warning. This vlog will contain spoilers. So if you don't want any of that, go read the book first and then come back and watch me chat about it. Hey guys, so I am about a quarter of the way through Assassin's Quest, a little over a quarter of the way. I'm on page 231. In my feelings towards this so far, I would say it's hard for me to vocalize because Fitz is still driving me crazy. I mentioned in my last vlog when I was reading Royal Assassin that I was just frustrated primarily with his lack of gratitude for the people in his life and his very egocentric way of thinking about things, which is all very realistic for a teenager, but it's just very frustrating to read, and this book really starts off with a lot of that. He's just so ungrateful, and he constantly is talking about, oh, how wonderful it would be to just be an animal and not have to worry about all of these things. And I'm just the kind of person that I'm like, you learn to better appreciate the good things in life when you have difficult things to deal with. And I just feel like he has this great desire for something that wouldn't truly make him happy. Yes, it would relieve a lot of stress for him, but I don't think he would ever really be happy. I think he would just be existing and maybe feeling contentment, but I don't think he would feel real joy. And I'm just like, really? You want to forget all of these people who have done so much for you and been so good to you? I understand part of it is his PTSD, so I can respect that, and that he also just needs a chance to grow up. But it is just frustrating to read, especially because Robin Hobb spends kind of a lot of time on that. There's been a lot of traveling in this book as well, which has just kind of slowed me down a bit in reading it. There's also just a lot to do with animals and dogs, which I would never call myself an animal hater because, I can snuggle up with an animal, I can pet them, whatever. I mean, I've never had a pet. My parents aren't the type to really want pets in their house. They preferred to spend our money on big trips and not have to deal with having to figure out what to do with an animal while we go on those trips. So didn't grow up with an animal, so I have a hard time really relating to a lot of those affections that Fitz describes for animals. And I'm also just a very pragmatic person, so this kind of connects to stuff I've already said, where the way Night Eyes sees the world makes sense for who he is. But every time we get into those modes where Fitz is acting like an animal and wishing he could just stay a wolf, and Night Eyes is talking about, like, don't worry about it, it's fine, I just get frustrated because I'm not that attached to animals in general, so I'm just kind of like, okay, yes, all the animal stuff. And me being a very realistic person as well, I just am like, Fitz, you just can't ignore what's happening. Like, and sorry, but you are kind of central to a lot of things that are happening. Maybe not like the bullseye of the target, but you are right around the bullseye of the target with Verity. Verity's obviously very central to everything happening. Along with Regal, I would say but Fitz is very much in their periphery. He's impacting a lot between the two of them. He plays an important role, and I'm just sitting there like, Fitz, you've put yourself in this situation. If you didn't want to play this big of a role, sorry, but you shouldn't have stuck your nose in certain places that you have, and that's just what you have to deal with. And then I'm like, people are dying and suffering a fate worse than death. They're being forged. And people you have claimed to care about are suffering as well and are doing their darndest to save their kingdom, to save their people, to save their loved ones. And you're just here frolicking around with your wolf and seeking your own personal revenge when there's just so much more going on. And he like knows all of this. What makes it even more frustrating is he knows all of this is going on and he has that sympathy and heartbreak for it, but he's just not really doing anything productive about it, proactive about it. So yes, I just feel like it's dragged a little bit with all of the journeying and him really battling these two sides of himself. In my head, I'm like, there's just so much going on between Regal and the Red Ship Raiders and the Forged Ones and Verity looking for the Elderlings and the Fool, whatever he's supposed to be doing. And yet here we are just wandering around trying to get to Regal just to get have Fitz get his own personal revenge. Although I will say him getting into, so the part I'm at now is him going to Verity after attempting to kill Regal. So I mean, there were some parts earlier in the book that I did enjoy. It really has started gripping my attention again with him going in to try to assassinate Regal and then being called off by Verity, which is great, but I was getting really frustrated and kind of bored in certain points, although I still just love being in this world. I feel like I have a hard time explaining my feelings for this book because I talk about all these negative things about Fitz and how I'm just frustrated with all of this stuff. And yes, there have been more moments where I have been bored, but overall there's still a positive feeling towards this book. Like, I just love being in this world. Even though Fitz drives me crazy, I also find his psychology and progression as a character very interesting, and I'm very excited to see how it continues on in other trilogies. I'm very interested to see where this ends up because, like I said, there's just so much that they need to deal with that I'm like, are they going to be able to deal with it all? Like, I just have a hard time believing that they're going to get all of these answers and figure out what to do about these Red Ship Raiders and the Forged Ones and all of that all in this book, along with dealing with Regal. Like, I feel like it's possible. I mean, I still have like 600 pages, so it's plenty of time to be able to get through all of that, but there's just so much that I'm like, I just feel like this Red Ship Raiders is going to be a deeper problem than even just dealing with the Raiders themselves. Like, I think there's something else. I mean, this white ship that Fitz kept seeing in the second book and how Fitz's abilities seem to connect to the white ship. I kind of am getting the feeling that his wit ability specifically is what is causing a lot of his connections, both with the Forged Ones and this white ship that he's seen, I think twice. I believe the wit is part of that, especially based on what some of those old blood people that Fitz met who had the bear and the eagle, raven, falcon, the bird as their wit bond. I don't know what you would call them, but anyway, those people brought up the fact that Forged Ones are attracted to people exercising the wit, especially when they're doing it in kind of a loud way. So clearly there's some connection there. I mean, just the fact that they're able to sense basically like the spirit of a creature, their personality and emotion and life, and then have the Forged Ones be basically like completely blank, like they can see him but they can't feel him that same way. I think that very fact shows a little bit of connection to it. So I definitely think just the amount that's gone into some of the exploration of both of those things, the Forged Ones and the wit and their connections, I feel like those things are going to play roles in later trilogies as well. Could be wrong, but I just feel like 600 pages, the way Robin Hobb writes especially, I don't know if it will be enough to wrap things up because she's a very slow burn writer, and so it takes her time to get places, it takes her time to take her characters to different plot points and character progressions. So yeah, I'll be very curious to see where this trilogy ends and where we may go in the later trilogies. So yes, those are my thoughts on the first quarter. There wasn't necessarily a lot that went on, like I kind of mentioned, so therefore I don't have a ton to say. I am really glad that we're going to find Verity now because I think that will pull me back in. It will bring all the things I've loved about this world in this series back into the foreground a little bit more, whereas it's been focusing on things that I don't hate, I just am not as interested in. So I think that will improve my experience and hopefully get me to read a little bit faster, but we'll see. Hey guys, so it's actually later that same day. It's the evening time. I have been reading a bit of Assassin's Quest. I'm not going to do a very long discussion clip. I'm going to wait until I'm closer to the halfway point. However, I had a realization just barely about why I felt the way I did about the whole Night Eyes situation and the wolf and Fitz wanting to be an animal so he can just live day by day and not worry about anything. And I mean, I stand by the fact that I'm not as attached to animals as other people are, and so I don't have that same level of connection to those aspects of stories. But like I said, it's not like I dislike animals, and in fact I do feel some level of affection for them. So I was like, why does it irritate me so much? Like, why is it bringing down my enjoyment so much while reading this? And I realized that I think it's because it's less about Fitz not appreciating what he has. I mean, it is, but it's about the fact that when he talks about wishing that he could just be a wolf and run away, it's like he's giving up. Like, it's almost like a form of, slight trigger warning just in case you need it, but it's like a form of suicide for him. It's a way to escape the life and the problems that he's been dealing with. It's a way, I don't want to say an easy way out because obviously it's so much more complex than that, but in a way it is the way he can escape everything he's dealing with and all of the suffering he's dealt with. And so I think part of me, when he talks about that, it's less about the animal aspects of it and more about the fact that I don't want him to give up, that I've mentioned a million times in these vlogs, that I get tired of his lack of gratitude for all those around him. And it's not me being mad at him necessarily for the sake of the other people, in a way it is, but it's more me being mad at him for the sake of himself. Like, he has all of these good people in his life, these caring people in his life, and he does not appreciate them, and he decides to be so egocentric and just focus on all the negatives. But it also made me understand a little bit more that during these kind of drawn out, kind of just depressing and skeptical portions at the beginning of this book that I didn't love, it actually was a really good exploration of PTSD and depression that goes along with that. And even in the second book, like, it really was depression that was driving a lot, and PTSD from what happened at the end of the first one. Like, he's dealing with all of these mental health challenges, really, and of course this is a fictional world. They don't have the same level of understanding of those things, but I feel like Robin Hobb is really exploring them in such a real way, and I just love it. Like, even those parts that I was feeling like they dragged, I wouldn't necessarily say I loved the process of reading them, but looking back at them, having this thought process, I'm less irritated by those portions. I'm less disappointed by those portions because I'm realizing the incredible mental health exploration that is being done by Robin Hobb in this. So that was a really great realization to have, and I think that's going to continue to help me. It also has just gotten a lot more exciting. There's a lot more humans involved, and I just love, my favorite parts in books are character relationships. Like, people talk about character-driven books. I particularly love relationship-driven books. I like books that are focused on the relationships between people, not just a single character or two and getting in their head. While I do like some level of that, I'm more interested in how they interact with other people and how various relationships impact who they are. So I'm glad we're getting a little bit more into where Fitz has people around. I think he's probably very happy as well, even though he hasn't quite said that. There was also just a really touching moment, just barely, with this girl, Starling, where she talked about how she sees Fitz as a hero and how much that meant to him. It was just the end of a chapter, very short, but I was just so touched by it because I hadn't really thought about it, but he's just been treated for so long by so many people as a disappointment, or as someone who's messing around and making mistakes, or as someone who's an enemy. And so to have someone who just says, you know, I see you as a hero because my brother saw you as a hero. You saved my brother, and that means a lot to me. And that's all she says, and then leaves. And you can just feel the weight off of Fitz's shoulders, that weight of just feeling like you'll never measure up, being lifted even just a little bit. And him mentioning like he actually got a good night's sleep for once after that, I just almost cried because I was like, that's so sad that he's just been struggling for so long. I also apologize that I keep shaking the camera. You're sitting on my tripod on my bed, and so every movement I make, it just bounces things around. So anyway, I'm gonna finish this clip. Probably will update you once I'm halfway through the book. Hey guys, so it is Saturday the 20th and I am over halfway through Assassin's Quest. I have about 370 pages left, so a good amount, but not so much that I'm feeling like I'm not going to be able to finish by this weekend, which was my goal. So I wanted to give you an updated look at my thoughts. I'm really happy because we're finally with people we've known from previous books. We've met back up with the Fool, Chade, and Ketcherkin, which is very exciting. I'm very pleased with that, especially because the book was getting a little bit repetitive of Fitz being captured and then escaping and then getting away for a little while and meeting new people and then getting captured again. It's so interesting reading Robin Hobb, I've found so far, because there's a lot she does that is it makes it feel very slow. There's a lot of dragging scenes, you know, she's very detail oriented and she's really trying to bring all of this stuff to life. So when Fitz is seriously injured, it takes him a long time to heal. So it takes a long time within the amount of pages that we have to progress past him healing. He also travels for a long time, and so there's a lot of long passages where it's just talking about him traveling and what they're doing while traveling, which is all so realistic. And so part of me really likes it for that because I feel like it really brings the world to life. It brings the story to life in a way that other stories just aren't able to do. And yet while reading it, there are moments where I'm like, okay, let's move on. So as I've considered that, I've decided to just kind of embrace all of the slowness because ultimately I do appreciate it. I think I appreciate it more than I dislike it. It's just different. Like, it's just something to get used to for me. And so it's taken me a bit of time to really fully appreciate it and embrace that I like it, I guess. That sounds really weird, but like, I just, again, in the moment, I'm like, oh man, this is dragging. But then when I think back on it and how close it makes me feel to the story, how much a part of the story it makes me feel, I just really like it. I also just love Robin Hobb's writing. She is such a beautiful writer. So just sitting in that is just a delight. As far as character situations go, Fitz is still driving me a little bit crazy, but I feel like it's changed a little bit where, you know, I mentioned in my last clip, I believe, that I've realized that a lot of what he's struggling with is depression and sort of like suicidal ideation in some ways. So I've kind of moved past my frustration with his relationship with Night Eyes. I also feel like it's developing in a much more healthy direction, which made me feel better because I was worried that Robin Hobb was making it seem like Fitz's desire to join with the wolves was healthy and normal, and I was like, and like a good thing, and I was like, oh, it just isn't. It's not. He's just giving up. But I'm seeing as that relationship develops that that's not what her opinion would necessarily be. It's supposed to be seen as unhealthy, and it's starting to get more healthy. They're starting to really develop individuality between the two of them, but also better understand what their relationship means and represents for them, and I've just really appreciated that. So I've been able to enjoy that aspect of the story a little bit better in the past couple hundred pages. However, Fitz's lack of appreciation for the people around him still is driving me bonkers. I think he's started to learn a little bit better how to show that appreciation and feel that appreciation. He recognizes his need for these people, particularly when it was discussing Chade. Like, it discussed how Chade asks him if he hates him, and Fitz's response is a little bit grudging, but he recognizes that he appreciates Chade's affection and cares about him enough and cares about what he represents as far as relationships goes enough to say that he doesn't hate him, even though he is really hurt by a lot of the things he's done. So you see that development a little bit. However, now I feel like it's switched a little bit where he's starting to appreciate things better. He's starting to understand what being a human means and how all the good things that go along with that just are associated with bad things a little bit. But he still has this attitude like everybody out to get him and that nobody really cares about him and that his life is just controlled by everybody else. And I just read it and I'm like, Fitz, that's everybody's life. Everybody has responsibilities. Everybody has duties that you just take on throughout life. If you're going to have relationships with others, you are accepting responsibility for that person in one way or another. And sorry, but that's just life. And like the fact that he's complaining and getting upset about people wanting to go with him to find Verity is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, I can understand he's concerned about other people getting hurt, but I feel like that's not really why he's mad or upset about the situation. It's because he just wants to be able to do whatever he wants and wants to be able to go on this quest the way he wants to go on it. But I'm like, dude, you have been injured so many times. You have been captured so many times being by yourself. You're miserable when you're by yourself, just thinking about how alone you are and how afraid you are all the time. I just want to shake him and be like, look, Fitz, you can't have everything. You can't have good relationships with people who care about you and also be able to do whatever you want. That's just not possible, and I just don't think he understands that just because he's in this position where it's a little more obvious that he's being used a lot does not mean that nobody else feels that way. I'm like, even Verity himself probably would rather not be doing everything he's doing, but he recognizes that there's other people involved that are hurting, and he just needs to do it for them. And he's able to find some level of joy in that. Same with Kettrikin. Like, it's not like she wants to put herself in danger. It's not like she wants to have to deal with her brother-in-law being a terrible person and deal with the fact that she doesn't know what's happening to her husband. All of these things are bad things that are happening to her that are out of her control, where she's having to do things she doesn't want to do, make choices she doesn't want to make, because she has responsibilities and she's just embraced them and is learning to find joy in where she's at in life, in her role in life. And I'm just like, I just want to shake Fitz and be like, look around you. Do you think any of these people really want to be here? No, most of them probably are just like you and want to live on a farm quietly and not have to worry about things the way you have to worry about them and make these decisions that alter all of human history. But guess what? They just embrace the fact that this is their role in life. They're going to make the best of it. They're going to try to make a positive impact. If they're going to be in a position where they have to make an impact, then they're going to seek to make a positive one. And Fitz just constantly is fighting that. And it's just constantly like, no, I just want to do what I want. I'm so sick of having to do all this stuff. And I just want to live in peace, and just will not embrace the fact that this is his responsibility. May as well make the best of it. I can understand some complaining, don't get me wrong. Like, his life isn't easy, and I can understand some frustration, but it's like he never is happy with anything, ever. Talk about reading this for misery May. Like, Fitz is just miserable all the time, but a lot of it is his own fault. Like, yes, a lot of bad things have happened to him, but a lot of good things have happened to him too, and I just feel like he focuses so much on those good things being taken away and not enough on the fact that he can continue to have good times and continue to have positive relationships. It makes me so frustrated that he's constantly complaining about how lonely he is, about people not knowing he's alive, but then when they do know he's alive, he's all sad because he wants to protect them, and so he doesn't want them to know he's alive. And then he's thinking about how Kettrikin might be feeling and how she's hurting and wanting to help her, but then as soon as he's in a position to help her by giving her information that will help her feel better, knowing that her husband might be alive, and trusting that she can handle whatever emotions come her way, and trusting that she'd probably rather believe for a time that he could be alive and that they could find him than just be stuck where she is. Like, at least they could figure out what actually happened to him if he is still alive, even if he does end up dying, which heaven forbid. So yes, hopefully someday in this series, someone will literally just say to Fitz, everybody feels that way, and we're all just dealing with it. Like, that's just life. Suck it up. Because a lot of people have come close to saying things to him, to his face, that I think pushes him in a better direction, but nobody's actually said anything like that, where they've pointed out, hey, I didn't really have a choice in this either, and I don't necessarily want to be doing this either, but I recognize that this is my role in life, and I need to embrace that. Anyway, sorry, had to have a little rant about that. Again, I know in my last video I kind of had a similar rant, but it just makes me sad because I do love Fitz. That's the thing, is I think it wouldn't frustrate me as much if I didn't have some level of affection for Fitz as a character. He's just a boy that's been put in a lot of difficult situations, and I feel really bad for him. He's just he's had times where he is trying to make the best of it, but things always just come to knock him down again, and so I do feel for him, and I want him to have the peace and joy that he seeks, but I just think he doesn't realize that a lot of it is his own attitude and his own choice to be happy. He has a lot of really good people around him. Like, I think my favorite characters in this do tend to be a lot of the side characters, as much as I do like Fitz and a lot of his storyline. I do tend to really appreciate the side characters a little bit more. I love the Fool. I'm so glad we're back with the Fool. I literally cried when the Fool was talking to him and being so glad that he's alive, especially because the last time the Fool saw Fitz, he was mad at him, thinking that he had killed Shrewd. And of course, immediately after he found out that no, that's not the case, because Fitz goes after the people who did kill the king, but that was kind of their last interaction, and so seeing the Fool just be so happy to see Fitz was just very emotional for me. I'm even getting emotional just thinking about it. Anyway, so loved that. I haven't seen much of Kettricken yet. We've just had a very brief scene that she was in, so I'm excited to get more from her. It sounds like she's probably going to go with Fitz on this journey to find Verity, as she should, so hopefully we'll get a little bit more out of her, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of a good conversation between her and Fitz, because I need someone to just put him in his place and help him to realize that he's not the center of the universe. And it's not a bad thing that he's not the center of the universe, that nobody is. Everybody's just trying to do the best they can. They're all the main characters of their own stories. And he has a lot to be grateful for, and a lot of people in his life who can bring him joy, even if it's just in brief moments, if he'll just let them. So anyway, I'm very curious to see how this book ends in the last 370 pages that I have to read, because I really don't think we're going to do everything we need to do between the Red Ship Raiders. I just think there's a lot of information we still need about them. Verity, we have to find. Regal, we have to deal with. And I don't think 370 pages is enough to do all of that, which I know there's future series with these characters. I just kind of thought that this particular series would wrap up a little bit more clearly, because I just assumed that to start off with, Robin Hobb was planning to just have this be one trilogy, but it seems like she was planning all along to have multiple trilogies / series, I guess, because I think there's at least one that's 4 books. But anyway, it seems like she was always planning to have more to this world and more to this story than just these 3 books, which is really interesting, because like I said, it's the first one, I just assumed that it would be wrapped up within itself, and I don't think it will be. I think there's just too much going on to wrap up, especially the way Robin Hobb tells stories and how drawn out she makes them. There's just no way 370 pages will wrap up everything that needs to be wrapped up. So I'm curious to see what is wrapped up by the end of this book and what will go on into the next series. So anyway, I think I'm going to read at least 170 more pages or so, and then I'll update you again, and then update you a final time at the very end of the book, of course. Okay, so I am currently about 120 pages from the end, and so I decided I should probably give you a few thoughts before I actually finish the book. So like I assumed I did, the pace definitely picked up for me, my interest definitely picked up as I've been with more characters that I really already like and know. We've also just had a lot of really exciting things, just a lot more magic going on within the story, which is just very exciting. We've learned that the Elderlings are dragons, which is very interesting, especially considering that a later series, I can't remember what it's called, but I know that dragon is in the title, so I'm assuming, this whole series of series is the realm of the Elderlings, so obviously the Elderlings were going to play a role throughout, but it is interesting seeing that dragon connection this early, knowing that there's a series that's really focused on dragons later on. We have found Verity, and it's really sad to see him. I hope he doesn't die. I've said this in so many other clips in the past couple of vlogs that I've done, especially my last one, but I just really don't want him to die. I love Verity so much, and it's just heartbreaking to see him as he is right now. I understand the reason why. I understand that he's needing to do this and sacrifice himself in this way to protect his kingdom, which I can respect, but it is just really sad to see him like that, especially with Kettricken. We also had a scene with the Fool that has gotten me really stressed, because I think I know what was happening, but the characters didn't realize what was happening. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty dang sure that Regal and or one of the other members of the coterie was controlling the Fool and made him ask questions about Molly and where she is, and Fitz, being the idiot that he is, told him at least what he knows, which obviously doesn't give an exact pinpoint location, but it gives a pretty good idea. And they still haven't realized that that was the issue. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this whole time it's been, the reason I figured it out is because this whole time they keep being like, don't think about Molly, don't think about any of these people, don't think about Regal, don't think about Verity, don't think about the members of the coterie, just ignore all of that, focus on this game so that you don't give anything away to them, open yourself up to them. And then suddenly the fool's asking these personal questions about Molly and he's insisting, like, where is she, basically? I'm like, come on. And then he faints and, like, is sick. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Obviously Regal or one of the other members of the coterie have been able to influence the fool. Like, Fitz took it as, like, he asks this question to the fool about whether any of the prophecies he's had speaks of the catalyst or Fitz dying. And the fool doesn't really respond to that. He just kind of goes further into asking where he can find Molly. And I'm like, Fitz takes that as, oh, apparently I am going to die. Like, that's why he said that. And I'm like, I think it's because it was Regal and he didn't know and he didn't really care, but he was like, oh, I can still use that to get him to just tell me where Molly is. So I'm just really stressed about that. There's like all these kind of calmer scenes going on and I'm just sitting here stressed the freak out because I'm like, Fitz, you told them where your child and Molly are and they're going to find them. So yeah. That's a stress. I could be wrong about that, but I really doubt that I am. I'm pretty dang sure that's what happened because even the fool said later on that he felt like that scene, that event was a dream, that conversation was a dream, which is what it would feel like if someone else was kind of in control of your brain. Also, I apologize for any screaming you may hear. My sister has some friends over and they were really quiet a second ago, but they've just kind of gotten louder. Anyway, I'm going to see what these last 120 pages hold. It is currently 9:15, so I easily will be able to finish this probably by midnight. And we'll see if I just end up being torn apart, as I kind of expect that I will be. If I'm being honest, I probably won't finish this vlog off tonight. I'll probably do it in the morning because I'm sure by the time I do finish this, I'm going to be too drained emotionally and just tired because it will be late. So just know it'll probably be tomorrow that I actually tell you my final thoughts, but I am for sure going to finish it tonight. So I finished the book and my feelings are very mixed. So in general, I like how Robin Hobb wrapped everything up as far as the answers to all of our questions, as far as the dangers we've been dealing with. I liked what the ultimate outcome of those things were. But pacing wise, I didn't really love how it wrapped up, how fast it wrapped up. I feel like as soon as we get the dragons then everything gets fixed, and I feel like there just wasn't particularly enough to do with the red ship raiders and how all that came together. Throughout the series we follow Fitz very directly dealing with the forged ones and with the red ships, and suddenly in this third one we don't have as much of that for obviously reasons. They're too far away from the coast to really have a lot of interactions with forged ones. Robin Hobb tries to keep this in perspective by having Fitz have these skill dreams where he's seeing a lot of the devastation going on, but even that kind of disappears in the last few hundred pages. We're not seeing as much of that, and so by the time we solve this problem it feels like it's been so long since we've directly dealt with it that the fact that we're not even seeing them actually deal with it or find these answers, Fitz is just kind of telling us after the fact what happened because he wasn't there, was honestly just kind of disappointing to me. Like, not being able to actually see the attack on the red ships, to not actually see them discovering how the forged ones were created. I feel like it was like a passing comment, like, oh yeah, and then they found these black stones in the ships and that's how they were forging them. They were taking their lives away from them, like how Verity put his life into the dragon, although he did it willingly, all that stuff. But it's like a very passing comment talking about how they find the black stones and that's where all these souls of these forged ones are. And to me, I'm like, really? After especially the first two where that was such a focus, to have that just be like a throwaway line was just really sad and disappointing to me. I like that we got the answer to that, and I honestly like the answer to that, but I just feel like I wish there was some way that Robin Hobb Hob had shown that in a more satisfying way. There's also like the white ships that it just kind of talks about, oh yeah, they were able to take out a couple of the white ships and that's where they found these black stones or whatever. But like we never really get an answer as to why Fitz seemed to be the only one who could see the white ship in a couple of those situations, and it seemed like only a few people had really seen them. They were like legendary kind of mythological things. But then they're like, oh yeah, and then the dragons just destroyed those white ships and found the black stones in them. And I was like, it just feels weird. I feel like there just has to be more to it. And maybe there is, maybe in later series we're going to get more information about that. But I kind of feel, so I mentioned in my last clip that it seems like Robin Hobb knew she was going to make further series because there's no way she's going to wrap up all of these plot lines. Well, she did. She didn't do it in a way that really satisfied me, but she did it. So clearly she probably didn't expect to necessarily write more series. The door is definitely open too with Fitz and the Fool and their supposed roles within this world. Obviously there has to be more to their story. It can't just be that event that they were influential on. I just feel like if they're living this whole long life afterwards, there has to be more to their roles. So there's that, but I just feel like ultimately this series feels like it was just meant to be a trilogy with the door open to make more, like I said, but not necessarily needing to. Robin Hobb just ended up choosing to. And so if that's the case, this is kind of disappointing to me, because if you're just wrapping up the trilogy like that, there's still some loose ends I just don't feel like we got really solid answers to. And I feel like if the answers we got at the end of this book are all there is to it, then it's like, okay, but I just feel like there could have been a lot more interesting things going on in the background that we didn't get to explore. So yeah, while I did actually like why certain things were happening, like I liked the idea of the black stones being what was causing the forged ones, I like the idea of having the dragons come and showing up and destroying the red ships and that all being a success, I just don't like the pacing that was behind those reveals. Now getting a little bit deeper into some of the where the characters ended up, and I think this is what made the ending most disappointing to me. Not disappointing, but most unsettling to me, or maybe unsatisfying is a better word for it. Not quite as satisfying as I would like it to be, is where some of our characters ended up. So first of all, I mean, I liked where a lot of the characters ended up. Let's start with Verity, because obviously you've all been watching my vlogs, knowing how things ended, and hearing me talk about how I really didn't want Verity to die, but knowing he was in a position that he probably would. I am really sad about his fate of basically dying. I mean, he doesn't really die, but you know what I mean. He's not himself anymore. And I definitely cried at that point. So that made me upset, but I like that that was how he went out. Like, I like that he went out really being a hero for his kingdom, and so and that they were able to recognize that. So if Verity was going to go, I'm glad that's how he went, but I am really sad that we don't get more of him in later books, and I'm sad for Kettrikin and her loss as well. So very bittersweet to me as far as Verity's fate, but if it was going to be bitter, I'm glad that it had that sweet aspect, and I'm glad that it went the direction it went in. Honestly, I do like where most of the side characters ended up, but I don't like where they ended up in relationship to Fitz. So I've mentioned several times throughout these vlogs that it frustrates me how ungrateful Fitz is and unappreciative he is of all of these people that really love him and care about him and want the best for him. And the ending, while he did grow a little bit towards the end of the book and start to realize some of those issues within himself, he doesn't actually grow out of that. He doesn't actually improve in that particular area because he doesn't even tell Patience that he's still alive. Like, that drove me absolutely crazy. I'm like, are you kidding? This woman who's basically your sole primary mother figure, who took care of you when she didn't have to, and you yourself in the second book said that she seemed to love you for you, whereas everybody else seemed to love you for what you could give to them, which was a whole other discussion in my head that I didn't agree with what he was saying. But he even admitted that he felt like Patience really cared about him as him, and yet he's not going to tell her that he's still alive. Like, I just could not understand that, especially when pretty much everybody else knows except for her and Burek and Molly. I was upset that Burek didn't know, but I also, with how Burek and Molly ended up, I understand why Fitz wouldn't want to interrupt that by mentioning that he is actually still alive. So even though I do still think Burek deserves to know, because he's basically Fitz's primary father figure, so he's in a position where, yeah, he deserves to know that his surrogate son is still alive, I understand why Fitz wouldn't want to tell him, and I can appreciate that. I can see both sides, basically, of that sort of argument. But Patience there's no reason not to tell her, and so I was really annoyed by that. And then yeah, Fitz just basically ends up by himself with his wolf Night Eyes, which, by the way, I did learn to appreciate Night Eyes a lot more by the end, which I'll mention a bit more in a moment, but I did. But that being said, Fitz just ends up with his wolf in this little cabin with Starling, who he just met in the third book, being the only one who regularly visits, who really visits at all, and this boy that we don't even meet throughout the series. He just kind of shows up at the end. I mean, we meet him sort of just like in passing as we're meeting Fitz as an older man looking back on things. He mentions his boy, but that's it. We don't really get much interaction with him, so we're not that emotionally attached to this boy. And so that's all Fitz has around him. Those are the only people he has around him, not the people that we've come to love and not the people that he should have come to love and appreciate and who love and appreciate him. The only one that's there that we really know is Night Eyes, and just nobody else is even visiting. Like, that's the other thing, is it's like, it would be one thing if he's just not living around them just because he wants to avoid court life, but they still like come and see him sometimes, or at least have once or twice. Like, but no, it's like he's just living out there by himself with no one talking to him except for Starling, and she's the only one that brings him information, and I just did not like it because I feel like it didn't show that Fitz had learned to appreciate all of the people he had been given in his life, and it made me frustrated. Backtracking a little bit, talking about Burek and Molly, I actually really like how that ended up. I mean, if I think about the context surrounding them as a couple, it's a little weird. I mean, a lot weird, both between Burek just being a lot older, but also him kind of being like a father figure to Fitz, who Molly was with before, and then to like have her have a sexual relationship with Fitz, and then once Fitz has passed away, she ends up having a sexual relationship with his father figure. It is a little bit weird. But if I just think about them as people with their personalities and how they ended up kind of coming together, I actually really love it. So very much mixed feelings as far as that goes, because yeah, the context surrounding it is a little bit weird. But when I just think about the fact of like Burek really caring about Fitz, and so when Fitz is gone, he ends up taking it upon himself to take care of this woman that Fitz loved and his unborn child, like, it's just really sweet. And then to have them be together like that, living together, taking care of each other, and then end up developing those feelings, I really liked that a lot. So, and I really just feel, I mean, Molly I was never that attached to, but I am really happy for both of them, and Burek especially, because I feel like he deserved to find some sort of happiness and peace like that, because he has done so much, sacrificed so much, and just become someone he didn't necessarily choose to become, given up so many opportunities to fulfill his responsibilities and do good in the world, not believing that he'd ever have peace and happiness like he's found in the end of this book. It just makes it all the sweeter that he did find that. So I ended up ultimately, generally, I really love it, even though there are some weird aspects to it. And that's another thing with Fitz and why his ending doesn't really like feel very satisfying to me, is because Fitz, yes, he finds his peace and happiness and you feel happy for him, but at the same time, like, Burek and Chade gave up so much and they were dealing with all of the same problems as Fitz was for a much longer period of time, and yet they just figured it out. Like, they just embraced their responsibilities and found ways to find contentment and joy within those roles, and they just did what they had to do, even though it was hard and they probably felt like complaining a lot, and they probably had moments of complaining in their lives, but they just pushed forward and just learned to accept their life. And so having them find happiness after all of that, especially after them thinking they never would, because they took these responsibilities so seriously and they were willing to sacrifice themselves for them, makes it so sweet when they actually find something that they probably had given up on finding. So I appreciate their endings because of that. Whereas Fitz, yes, he gave up a lot. Yes, he ended up taking responsibility for his role in life. But it was always so grudging, and it was always with this idea of he's like, once this is done, then I can just go away and I don't have to deal with this anymore. And it was just constantly like that. So it was just constantly negative attitude about everything and an angry attitude towards all those people around him. So by the time he ends up with this happy life, you're like, okay, congratulations, Fitz. Like, you finally found what you were looking for. You finally checked off enough boxes to get where you want to be, so way to go. It's just not as satisfying to me as seeing these people who honestly really deserve it because of just who they are as a person, not just what they did. It's so much better than seeing Fitz, who, yes, he did a lot to deserve it, but he also was not the type of person who I was like, oh, you've become a person who really deserves something like this. So anyway, it was unsatisfying to me, to say the least. I also wanted to mention the Fool. I was slightly disappointed with where the Fool ended up as well. I just would have thought that the Fool would have wanted to be closer to Fitz, and I would have thought that Fitz would have wanted to be closer with the Fool. So I think it's weird that the Fool just kind of disappears and is probably a toy maker somewhere. At least that's what Fitz thinks. And the fact that the Fool has the earring, Bjork's earring, is also really weird to me, because it's made it to seem like it's a really sweet thing, like, oh, the Fool has it now. But like, it was representative of Bjork's relationship with Chivalry and then with Fitz. So like, it was that particular relationship that earring was meant to represent. And so when Fitz tells the Fool, like, if I die, I want you to take this earring, then that's really sweet. That's really nice. Because Fitz doesn't want it to just be lost. He wants someone to have it because it means so much to him and to Bjork and to his father. But when Fitz survives, like, why would having the Fool have that earring mean anything? Because it's about Bjork and Fitz and Chivalry. Like, it has nothing to do with the Fool or anything even generally, like, important. I guess you could say, like, it's now Fool's connection to Fitz, and that's really sweet, I guess, if you think of it that way, but that's, like, not what the earring originally represented, and so it just felt a little bit like it was trying to be a sweet thing, but it just didn't make sense in my head. I'm like, it would have just been nicer if Fitz just kept the earring. Like, it just didn't mean much to me, ultimately. So yeah, my feelings once I finished last night were kind of in turmoil, and I honestly had a lot of dreams about the book because my brain was just trying to figure out how I felt about it and what frustrated me about it, but what I did like, there was a lot that I enjoyed about it. Like I said, like, I liked Verity and his story, even though it was pretty bittersweet. Like, ultimately, I appreciate that that's what ended up happening with him. I liked where Kettricken and Patience ended up, just being leaders, and these two women that a lot of the people didn't really like very much ended up being the survivors and the ones who stand out and lead. In the end, I really liked that. I liked how Regal was dealt with. I felt like that wrapped up nicely, and I think part of that was because Regal was constantly a threat throughout the whole series, whereas, like I said, the red ships kind of disappeared for a little bit, and so getting that storyline wrapped up just felt fast and wasn't as close to the heart anymore, because it's been a while since we really discussed that directly. But Regal, I felt like his storyline wrapped up very satisfyingly to me, and we actually got like the build up and the payoff on that one as well, which I don't feel like we got with the red ships. Like I said, I like Bjork and Molly being together, even though, like I said, there's some weird aspects to it. Ultimately, I do like it a lot. By the end of the book, I did like Night Eyes as a character, and I do like that Fitz and here together. Like, don't get me wrong, that's probably the best thing about Fitz's situation that I can see. Although it does make me worried, because I did look at the Tawny Man trilogy, the first book, and just to see what point we're picking up within that series, and it says it's 15 years after the Red Ship War, so it's possible Night Eyes is gonna be dead, or he will die sometime in that next trilogy with Fitz and the Fool, so that will be very sad, especially now that I'm actually attached to him. So yeah, that was unfortunate, but I do like that Fitz and Night Eyes are together and that Night Eyes made it. Chade, I don't necessarily love where he ended up, because I kind of wanted a little bit more for him, and I kind of wish that he and Fitz would at least see each other every once in a while, but it kind of makes it very clear that Chade never visits, and I don't know, that's kind of disappointing to me. But I'm glad that Chade is in the open and he's able to live a real life a little bit more than he ever has before, so I like that he gets that. Yeah, ultimately I like where everybody ends up. I just, Fitz being the main character, didn't quite love where he ended up, and I didn't quite love where his relationships with the other people ended up, and that's so central to everything because he's the main character that it makes me extra confused, even though the majority of the ending I did like just listing off all of those things, that's the majority of the ending pieces that I really liked, but some of the biggest ones I didn't love, and so my feelings are just very much in turmoil. So anyway, I will continue with The Realm of the Elderlings, don't get me wrong, because I'm really hoping that later trilogies with Fitz will fix some of the problems that I've had. And the thing about these books is I just love Robin Hobb's writing, and I love her way of exploring characters and the world. Even though Fitz drove me crazy throughout so much of it, and there were some pacing issues that I had, ultimately I loved sitting in Robin Hobb's world and her writing. I loved the majority of her characters, and even Fitz, even though I don't necessarily love him, I do love him. I do appreciate him as a fully rounded person, and I just want him to... The only thing that he's missing is that lack of appreciation, and I just think if he had that, I would love him because I love a lot about him. I just get so frustrated by that aspect of his character. So yes, don't worry, I will be continuing. I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars on Storygraph and then 4 stars on Goodreads, and I actually changed my Royal Assassin rating to match that because I feel pretty similarly about the two of them. I think I might say I like Assassin's Quest more because I just like a little bit more of the magic that's in it. However, the second one I really like I like people. I like my people in my books. And so when Fitz is in a position where he's surrounded by more people and interacts with them more, I just tend to like that more than I like when he's by himself with his wolf just wandering around. So basically, I think I liked the first half of the second book better than I liked the first half of the third book, but I like the second half of the third book better than I like the second half of the second book. So that's how I felt about it. So I decided to just put them even with each other. I did like the first book the best, for sure. But I'm really excited to see what ends up happening with Fitz in the future and the other characters that I've come to love. I also, this is kind of a side note, but I was kind of confused about the fact that we never saw those 3 minstrels again within this book. Like, they played this role for this period of time, and I don't necessarily feel like they should have played a huge role the rest of the time, but I'm surprised we never ran into them again. I just felt like they were in a position where they would show up again, and then they never did, which maybe in a future series they will, but I can't even remember their names. I think one of them was named Honey, maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, there was the older man and who was blind, and then his 2 women that he had with him. I can't remember if they were relatives or not. But yeah, I thought they were interesting characters, and then they left and we never saw them again, and I just felt like they were the kind of characters that I would have expected to show up again. So anyway, that was very interesting. And I think that's all I have to say about it. So yeah, a lot of mixed feelings. Ultimately though, I love being in this world. Like, as soon as I finished this book, I wanted to immediately start Live Ship Traders because I love sitting with it, and I love seeing where things end up going, and I'm excited to see where things continue to go and how the characters continue to develop. I'm really scared to see who ends up dying between this series and the next series with Fitz, as I'm sure someone will, or a couple someones will. Maybe not, but I would think so. And I think that will do it. I'm just rambling now. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below your thoughts on a lot of the things I've talked about within Assassin's Quest. Of course, please no spoilers for future series, but if you have any comments to make about things I've complained about as far as them improving in the future, or even just telling me that you're excited to see how I feel about other books or other specific series within this huge series of series, then please let me know again. But yeah, keep it spoiler free. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!